hot drinks and nowhere to sleep other than a concrete floor. That's what hundreds of asylum seekers who made it across the Channel faced on arrival to the UK last summer, according to a report released today. Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Prisons looked at how people who got into Britain, hidden in vehicles or freight trains, were dealt with on arrival. It found that some were held in a space which was not adapted for use as a holding facility and that staff had not received proper training to deal with the situation. Figures showed that the number of asylum seekers detained at Dover Seaport increased significantly from over 2,000 in 2014 to nearly 5,000 by last year. And as we mentioned, many detainees were held overnight on the concrete floor of a shed with no clean or dry clothes and offered nothing in the way of food or hot drinks. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Ousman Noor, who's a barrister, and also he's the director of Habeas Corpus project. It's a London-based charity representing immigration detainees. Ousman, you obviously represent many people under these conditions. Can you give us an idea of what sort of experiences, what they have had to endure?
Well, one of the most important things in the UK, which a number of important NGOs, including my own, has criticised, is that there is indefinite detention for people waiting for their appeals to go through. There is no time limit to how long they can actually spend in detention. This creates a deep psychological anxiety for those who simply don't know what's going to happen to them next. The conditions in detention vary, but on the whole, my observations are they're poor.
Does it surprise you that you've heard this report that people were detained under those conditions during a short period of time? It must be said about 12 hours or so, some maybe a bit longer, but there was a massive influx of asylum seekers coming in at that time to the UK, and clearly the authorities were under duress.
Well, the Prisons Inspectorate report does actually say, yes, there was a significant increase. My own position is that that increase was surely anticipated. The government were not ignorant of the fact that thousands of people were fleeing from places like Syria, Sudan, Eritrea, and they must have known that this number of people were going to be arriving.
Even through the channel, which was supposed to be under intense security measures.
Well, there's always been people arriving through the channel. They knew that in 2015, as the whole world knew, many more refugees were coming into Europe, and there would have been a corresponding increase of people coming to the channel. They did not make the relevant, proper safeguards to maintain certain levels of dignity for those asylum seekers when they arrive to the UK.
And certainly that wasn't achieved, although many people say, well, these are illegal people coming into this country, and obviously they don't deserve five-star treatment, but what you're saying is there's no way they deserve what they actually did get when they arrived.
Well, inherent in claiming asylum in any country is that you probably have entered there illegally. You will not have applied for a visit visa. You will be seeking asylum because you're fleeing from a war zone. Therefore, you've come there illegally. The Geneva Convention knows that, respects that. And asylum seekers are people. They need and have a right to a certain level of dignity and respect, and whilst their claims are being processed, whilst we establish whether or not they are refugees, these detention centres ought to have the correct basic safeguards for their well-being.
Do you see them improving? Obviously, as a result of this incident, this report, the government is saying this will not happen again. We will not see people sleeping on concrete floors. In general, though, detention centres, a lot of criticism. We get a lot of people on this channel talking about them, the appalling conditions. Do you think they will be improved?
Well, it's interesting that the condemnation coming from politicians has only really now come through when the Prisons Inspectorate has actually released this condemnatory report. This whole time, the immigration enforcement knew that this was going on, did not implement some of the most basic common sense provisions for these people. And so I think accountability is key. The more that such reports expose these conditions, the more that charities like my own expose those conditions, the more likely it would be, I think, that politicians would freely condemn and actually improve those conditions. But overall, I have to say I'm not too optimistic. I'm doing my best, and I think many are, but the conditions overall continue to be the way they are, and that's not just for these detention centres. Recently there was a report into the Harmondsworth detention centre, which was also very condemnatory. The Yarlswood notorious detention facility has also had very scathing remarks made by the Prisons Inspectorate, and so overall I don't think we've got much room to be optimistic. We can do our best.
Ousman Noor, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, the EU and Turkey say they've agreed on an outline for a broader deal to tackle